Welcome back to the FERNWEH Quilt Along. Today begins week 3. So if you're just now joining us or just now hearing about this quilt along, you will need a copy of the FERNWEH quilt pattern. It's available at meanderandmake.com. All right, so we're on week 3, but in the previous weeks, week 1, we cut and organized. Week 2, there's a demo of how to make the block. You can go back and watch those videos if you haven't yet. This week, our task is to make another set of blocks. So again, it's 3, 4, and 5. If you're working on the 72 inch, you're making 3 blocks. 72 by 96 inch, you're making 4 blocks. And the big quilt, 96 by 96, you're making another 5 blocks. And like I mentioned last week, I showed you how to make the block, right? And you can continue using that video if you like making blocks one at a time, if that's your favorite method, or it just feels good for you, or you can stay. I think it's definitely a lot more easier to make blocks one at a time. Continue doing that. But if you are a person who is crunched for time, if you are a parent, if you work a full or part-time job, if you're taking care of a loved one or somebody else, if you are just finding yourself with not an amount of time for any reason whatsoever, the demo I'm about to show you is all about efficiency. And instead of making one block at a time, we're going to make all our blocks at the same time. And this is pretty much how I go about making almost all my quilts. Of course, there's going to be exceptions, sampler quilts, etc. But most of the time, if a pattern is telling me that I need a flying geese unit, I don't just make that unit for the one block. I make it for all the blocks. And I find this type of batch sewing, I find it easier for me to stay, on task. But I also find it all I get the quilt done much faster. And for me, who needs to make a lot of quilts, it helps me able to do that. So this demo is not going to be for everyone. If you are one at a time, stay one at a time. That's okay. It doesn't matter, whether you are or you aren't. It's just what is best suited for your needs. If you are like me, crunched for time, and you've got to get certain things done, the way I'm going to show you doesn't really take any of the therapeuticness out of quilting. It still feels like, quilting to me. I'm just doing all my tasks in batches instead of one at a time. All right, so just skip this part if you're not interested and go to the end of the video, and then I'll talk about prizes, schedule, etc. If you're interested in efficiency, watch today's demo. So we are doing the same thing that we did last week. You're making either 3, 4, or 5 blocks depending on which size quilt you're making. For me, that means 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And let's go ahead and sort out the background pieces we need for each of our blocks, just like we did last week. All right, so I've got everything sorted with what I need for each block. I'm making 4 blocks. You also may be making 3 or 5, just remember that. But depending on what size, I've got my foreground and my background and all of these nice and neat stacks. Okay, so we are looking at the corner units part of the block assembly. We're looking at step 1. So if you are drawing your diagonal lines, like I showed you, in last week's demo, go ahead and draw your lines on the squares that you need to, but do it for all blocks. Now, I don't know if you remember that I talked about how you can skip that part. So I'm actually going to skip it this time and not worry about doing that. And there was a separate video for that if you missed it. I will link it again right below wherever you're watching this video. It just kind of lets you skip that part. All right, so we're looking at corner units on step 2, and that's the step we're going to tackle right now. But instead of tackling it one block at a time, we're going to tackle all 4 of our blocks. Each one of your block stacks that we've got going on here has 4 background fabric if you're on version 2, foreground fabric if you're on version 1. Each stack is going to have 4 squares that don't need any piecing that are part of that corner unit. So go ahead and pull out 4 of those, and we're just going to put all of these to the side. 3, 4. And remember, these are just that little piece on the corner of every block, on every corner of every block, that doesn't need piecing. It's just a whole square. So, all right, those are gone, out of the way. So now we're gonna pull out everything that we need for step 2. So I need these and I need these. It's just those 2 sizes. So this is what I'm grabbing for version 2. If you are working version 1, remember your bigger square will be in your foreground and your smaller square will be in your background fabric. So take a minute and grab those. And I'm just going to keep all this in nice little stacks. I'm going to kind of move them out of the way because I'm gonna be cutting over here on this part of my table. But let me get all of these out. So this is everything I need for step 2 of corner units from all 4 of my blocks, all right? And I'm gonna take all of this to the sewing machine. Okay, and I've actually got my pattern with me just to make sure that I do everything the right way because sometimes going from cutting mat to sewing machine, I get a little out of order. So I've got my pattern over here where I can see it, where I can keep up with what's what. And as you know, we are doing those snowball units, which end up like this, right? It ends up just like that, but we're gonna do it for all of them, okay? So I'm actually going to go ahead and do just like this and grab one, put it on that corner, just like that. Just like we did, same thing we did last time, we're just doing more quantities of them at the same time. All right, and then I'm gonna start sewing. And I am actually using this tape, which again was part of that second video. Now, if you had drawn your line on these, you need to sew on your drawn line. But again, I'm using that special tape where I can skip that part and be a little bit more efficient. All right, I want to stay organized because I do have all of these pieces, you know, of all my blocks instead of just the one block at a time. So I do want to stay organized as best I can. When I get done with these, I'm gonna keep them, I'm gonna put them back in their per block stacks. But right here at the sewing machine, I'm just gonna keep doing this and get them all sewn. I'm gonna pop back on here when I have them all sewn. All right, so now we're just gonna cut these apart. And if I didn't say it before, you should have 8 for each block. So I'm cutting 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm just gonna try to keep them in their correct stack. So this is, you know, all of these snowballs for one block. And I'm gonna continue doing that as I cut these off, just making sure, because if I get going and I don't think about this as I do it, I will sit and have, you know, the wrong pieces in the wrong block. So to avoid that, I'm gonna kind of keep them grouped back together. All right, I've got my 4 stacks. I'm gonna kind of just take them back to the pressing mat. All right, and we're gonna set these seams. And again, I've got them in their stacks. I want to try to keep them together as best I can throughout this whole process. And I'm just going to go through and set these seams. All right, I had a whole bunch of questions this week about snowballs and them coming out the wrong size for you, and or your seams not matching up, and you're looking for pointers to how to do that. This and starch is going to be my biggest pointer, because look at let me show you on this one because it's really obvious on this one. All right, I'm hoping you can see this on the camera, but there's just a slight tension. It's not a bad tension issue. My stitching is fine. I could go in there and adjust it a hair, but I never mess with tension unless it's really, really bad. But you can kind of see how it's just not sitting flat the way this one I just pressed is. If I don't set this seam and I go and cut it, I could be cutting it just a tiny smidgen off, and all those tiny smidgens add up to your points not matching. So my biggest tip, if you're looking for help with your snowballs or your points lining up on these parts of the block that we don't nest, because we're not nesting this one. It's easier to get your seams matched up when you nest, but on this particular part of the block, we can't do that. So, you know, I just want to make sure that I'm doing all these steps that are extra and do take more time. But again, if you're sitting there wondering why your snowballs aren't perfect, this could be one of those reasons. It's extra time, extra things involved in doing it, but if you want things to look just so, you kind of have to act just so. So I'm sitting here setting all these seams, all right? So I'm gonna get this done and then meet you at the cutting. All right, and again, I've got my 4 blocks, my snowballs sets for those 4 blocks, all stacked up in little separated stacks so that, you know, I'm staying organized. I don't want you to be mad about going for more efficiency, but then getting disorganized and having the wrong pieces sewn in your block. All right, so we're gonna do this, and we're doing it for every one of those snowballs for all of our blocks. So there are 8 per block again, and we're just gonna get this step done, and then I'm gonna meet you over at the pressing mat when I have all 32 of these done. All right, there's more of these at a time, but I don't feel like it takes that much more time, maybe just a little bit. It just adds to the efficiency. All right, so here we are. I've got my 4 stacks, you know, 8 for each block. Again, I know I keep saying that, but I just wanna make sure we're on the same page. And we're just gonna do our little flip and press just like this. All right, so I have those 8 done. I'm just gonna stack these up nicely, and for right now, I'm just gonna put them, you know, over here in little stacks, and I'm gonna continue doing these for each block, and then I'll get back with you as soon as I've got all 4 stacks done. Okay, so I've got all my pressing done for all those snowballs, and what I'm gonna do now is put these where they go with each set of block, right? So I know these go here, these go here, here, and here. Now yours can look a little bit different from mine, that's fine. I'm just trying to make sure, you know, that I'm staying organized. I'm not gonna get things mixed up. I'm not gonna fuss at myself today. So we are still under corner units, and we're gonna start looking at step 4, all right? And we're gonna grab our pieces for that step 4. And I think we're gonna use all of that middle size square. This will be background if you're working version 1, and it'll be foreground if you're working version 2 like me. And then we're gonna grab all those itty bitty tiny squares, and we're just gonna stack these up just like this. All right, so in your piles that are left for your blocks, you should have your giant square that goes in the center of each block. You should have, you know, your snowballs, your remaining of these, and then your long units. So that's all that should be remaining in your stacks. And again, this will be foreground and background reversed if you're working on version 1. But we're taking all of this to the sewing machine. So we're doing the same thing on this step that we did in the last week's video. We're doing the same thing, we're just doing more at a time. So last time we did 8 at a time. This time we're doing 32 at a time. So just getting all these similar steps out of the way all at the same time. So nothing's really different, it's just no one at a timing it, right? So I'm gonna get all of these little snowballs sewn on, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, done on one side. We'll get these all clipped. I'm keeping them in their little blocks together, right? I think there's 4. Yeah, there's 4 of each colorway. All right, and then we'll spin around, and now we'll do this side the exact same way. So again, same as last time, just more at the same time. All right, so you should have 4 in each colorway that look like this. And again, if you're working on version 1 of this quilt, this will be your background and this will be your foreground. But if you're working version 2, foreground and background, all right? And we're just gonna go through these just like before and set all of their seams. And you wanna be careful that you're not doing this number. You're going up, and down, up and down. Wherever you move it to, it's up and down. So just like that. And then I'm gonna keep going until I've got them all done. Grab these and get the little corners trimmed off of them, just like we did last week, except now we're doing it for all of them. And I think I keep saying 32, but on this particular step, there should be 4 for each block. So I'm gonna keep going with this until I got it done. All right, so just like last week, we're doing these, pressing these snowballs, you know, just like this. You know how to do this part. I'm not gonna make you watch me do all these. So let's get all of our snowball corners pressed out for each colorway. Just make sure that you're keeping, you know, each colorway in its own little stack. Just stay organized, right? That's all I want you to do. So do that, and I'll meet you back here when I've got them all done. All right, I've got all of these done, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm keeping organized, and we're about to put our corner units together. So there's my 4 stacks for representing a block each. 1 block, 2 block, 3 block, 4 block. Remember those squares that we put to the side? Each block is gonna have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna put it with each one of these.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We're about to get into the meat of this whole batch sewing business. I'm gonna grab those units that look like this that we just got done with. I'm grabbing them for each block. Just in case you didn't remember, there should be, you know, 8 for each block. And I'm gonna put them where they go. So and I'm gonna keep them in their little stacks, but I'm just gonna move 3 of these blocks out of the way and put my focus on the 1 block. And we're gonna lay out our corner unit. So here's what our corner unit is gonna look like. And I'm gonna go ahead and put them in little stacks just like this. And I'm doing this because this is how I'm gonna start chain piecing everything. So that, remember, there's 4 for each block. Double check that you've got, you know, everything pointed in the right direction, because this is kind of your last opportunity to do it without getting things mixed up. We're gonna grab our next set. We're gonna do the exact same thing. So again, just like that, and then we're gonna put them in these stacks. I'm gonna do that for all of my stuff, making 4 for each block, and then we'll, I'll get with you right after I've got this done. All right, here's those stacks that I made. All right, and here's the thing. We can make things so much easier on ourselves just by being a little mindful. When I pick these up and take these to the sewing machine and I set them down, I'm gonna set them down just like this. No twisting, no turning, no flipping, no. Keep it just like this, all right? All right, so let's go to the sewing machine. All right, so I'm coming to the sewing machine in the exact same way. My hands aren't twisting, turning, you know, being reckless. Reckless. We are keeping it exactly the way it was. And we're gonna put this side, you know, on this side of us, and this side right here. All right, and now we're gonna just start sewing them together. All right, so boom, just like that. So get all of these sewn together, just the same way, just more at a time. We're just batching all this stuff, making things move a little quicker. Also, one of the things that I like about batch sewing is that if you are, especially when you're learning all these rules to all these, you know, different types of shapes and things like that, you don't move on to another shape without, you know, remembering. You do all of this step at the same time, you're more likely to remember all the rules to that shape or that step, right? So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna finish these up and then we'll go on from there. Okay, all sewn. And instead of just willy-nilly cutting these, I'm just going to do them one at a time. And the reason I'm doing that again is because I've got these are my rows, right? For those corner units, row 1 and row 2. I want to keep them in the right order that I had them in. So I'm just going to do this a little bit slower than I normally do, but it's not going to really slow me down that much because we're getting these blocks done pretty quickly. So let's get done with this and then I'll meet you back over at the pressing. All right, so up until now, we've kind of done that setting the seam first and then pressing in the direction we want, but this time we're kind of just going to do it the setting and then the pressing all at once. So on row 2 of your block, you know, you're pressing it this way. So we'll just put this guy just like that, right? Make sure that we got that seam pressed in the right direction. And then row 1, set the seam, and then we're pressing it towards the unpieced square. So that way. And I'm gonna do this for each of my corner units per block. So I'm just kind of just like this. And when I get to I'm gonna just do the one block at a time right here. So let me just show you what that looks like. All right, now I'm just gonna keep these just the way they are, and we're just gonna keep pressing the rest of these for now, and we're gonna set these just out of the way, right? And I'm gonna continue pressing for each one of these blocks, or each one of the rows within each block. So let's just finish this, and then I'll meet you back up to get these pinned into place. Okay, all done with my pressing, and now I've got, you know, this going on. I'm gonna grab one from each of these stacks. You know, double check that your pieces are going in the right way. Double check that you're using the correct fabrics. This is version 2, but if you are if you're making version 1, you know, this will be foreground and this piece will be background. All right, we're gonna do the same thing we did last week, which is to flip row 1 onto row 2. We're gonna nest this seam in place and put a pin right in that stitch line. And then I'm gonna pin the 2 ends. So just like that. And I'm gonna do that for each one of these until I have, you know, 4 of these per block. And so let's get done with that. All right, so I've got them all pinned, and I'm going to send them through the sewing machine, you know, chain piecing them just the same way right across here that we did on the last week's video. And I'm gonna do that for all of them. When I get them all sewn and I start clipping those little threads, I'm gonna stack them one at a time, you know, just like I've been doing, just to keep things in order. So let's get that done, and then we'll get these opened up. All right, we've got all of these sewn, and now I'm just going to flip through them really quickly, just like this, setting those seams. Probably do about 4 at a time here, and then just keep them like that because I've got them all organized. You know, each of them is like these 4 here are 1 block, so that's why I'm doing them in 4s. So just like that, boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna get these done, and then we'll press them open together. Right, and now we will just press all of these open. I'm gonna go through this whole stack, you know, doing all of these just like this. And when I've got it done, we'll start on our middle column together. All right, now this part is actually pretty important. So as you can see, I've got my 4 stacks for representing 4 blocks. And our next step is to work on those middle, you know, units. And if I start pulling these, I'm going to forget, you know, which fabric A goes with fabric B. So it's pretty important for you to go ahead and place these, you know, where they go. So this should match this, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and stack those together. And 1, 2, 3, 4. These go with this one. I'm just gonna put them on the bottom like that. But they're together so that when I pull these pieces for the middle unit, you know, I'm good to go. I'm ready to. I can pull them without losing which A and B goes together, because if I don't do that now, then I'll forget, unless I took a picture of it, I guess. But for me, I'm just going to do it this way. All right, there we go. And now we're ready to go on to the middle units. All right, so we're going to start working on our middle units now, and we should be on step 1 and 2 of the middle unit section. Go ahead and draw your lines if you're drawing lines. And if you're not drawing lines, you're going to start pulling out those rectangles. And if you remember, we do these 4 at a time. So one side of that middle unit, the other side of that middle unit. So we can go ahead and grab all these, break them up into 4s. And then we should be grabbing all of these remaining square pieces. And, so got all these. And we've still got our block sets all laid out. And remember, if you're working on version 1, you're going to have the reverse of me. This is going to be your background, and this is going to be your foreground. And you may want to look out for that bottom part of these, because it's done in fabric B, okay? But if you're working on version 2, it should look just like mine. But if you're working on version 1, again, remember that you've got 2 different squares. You should have 2 stacks of squares, foreground and background, right? So we're going to grab the first stack, and we're going to work on these. All right, so you want to make sure, so I'm not going to, you know, go back through how to do this again because I showed you last week, but we're working on that step 2 of the middle unit, and we're just going to get to sewing these units together. And you want to make sure that you are, you know, putting these squares in the right place and making sure that you're sewing in the right direction, because it does change, you know. So I will meet you back at the pressing mat when I have this step completed. All right, so we have all of our units. That's 4 a block, 4 per block, right? We got it done. Let's get these seams set. After I get my seam set, I'm gonna go ahead and trim off all of these corners like I showed you in last week's video, and then I'll also get them pressed towards, you know, pressed towards the corner. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these all completely finished up, and then I will see you when I got it done. All right, so I've got this step done, and this was, you know, step 2 and 3 of your middle unit section. And we're gonna use these remaining rectangles and those remaining squares, and we're gonna do step 4 through 5 on this. So I showed you this last week, just in case you're a little bit lost. We had a whole video of how to do every single step. So go ahead and do 4 and 5 on this side, and then I'll meet you back over here for step 6. All right, so here we are. I've got both sets done, but I want to take a minute, you know, and get them organized where I can take them to the sewing machine and just, you know, start sewing them together. All right, so here we are. And I'll just, you know, pop them together at the sewing machine and chain piece all of them, running them through. So I'll get done with that, then go ahead and press all of them, go ahead and starch all of them, and we'll get ready to assemble our blocks. Okay, so I've got all of these pieces done, and I kind of want to just put them over here where I've got my blocks laid out. I kind of want to just put them, you know, with the set they belong in, just to keep organized a little bit. Or kind of just turn this where I can just grab really easy, actually. So I'm putting them just like this. And there's a bunch of ways that you could approach this. you could take, you could do these one at a time. You could take them all at once to the sewing machine. I think the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab the first row for all the blocks. So like I'm going to grab this, this, and this, and I'm going to put these to the side. And I'm going to do that for every one of them, I think. You want to make sure that you've got everything turned in the right direction as you do this, because it would be really easy, you know, to get out of sync. And that way I can be completing, you know, one row at a time. Of course, another way to do this would, you know, just to take them all over to the sewing machine and break it up into block by block, knowing that you have to get, you know, them all to look like this. So just decide what's best for you. I think this is going to be what's best for me. I just want to be sure that I'm taking these and putting them, you know, in the direction I want them in. So there's my row 1, and then I will sew, you know, all these together. And then I'm going to do the same thing for row 2. I'm going to get them sorted just like this. So row 2. And then for row 3, it actually looks just like this, except turned the opposite way. And I will do all that, and then I'll meet you after I've got all my rows sorted. All right, I've got all rows sewn together, and I've grouped them by block. So if I pull one, you know, I'll be sitting over here like this. So that, I feel like that made a lot shorter work versus doing it one at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get all of these pressed, and then I'm going to get all of these pressed, and as I get them pressed, I will start pinning, you know, row 2, this row down to this row, and then I'll just set this row just, you know, kind of off to the side and try to stay organized again. All right, I'm going to show that to you when I've got this part of the process done. All right, so I've got them all over here, all my rows 2 and 3 pinned. I've got all my row 1s over here, just out of the way. I'm going to go ahead, get this sewn, get them all pressed, pin all of row 1 onto these, and do the same thing until I have all my blocks done. Okay, so I am all done with my 4 blocks, all done at the same time. Yeah, all right, so that's it for today's demo. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's demo on batch sewing. If you didn't, if it's not for you, that's okay. Don't even worry about it. And if you are still wanting to stick with one block at a time, yay. It doesn't matter which way you choose to do it, as long as the blocks get done, right? Okay, let's talk prizes, because we're about to kick it up a notch on prizes. This week, 2 quilters participating in FERNWEH Quilt Along are going to win long arming services for a quilt. The first one is Modernly Stitched Quilting Studio. She's actually quilted for me before. I think she quilted a Sassy Granny for me. She's great. She's offering services for 1 winner, and on any of the size quilts up to 96, I think she said. I don't even think it has to be a FERNWEH, but you'll need to check, of course, with her. Autumn Moon is also sponsoring a winner, and she is offering any size FERNWEH quilt. It does have to be a FERNWEH quilt. So 2 chances to win long arming services. I haven't used Autumn Moon Quilting, but I follow her on Instagram, and she's great. I can't wait to choose winners. I can't, because these are always long arming services. They're always I don't personally get them that often, so I consider them a bit of an extravagance when I get to have something quilted by a long armer. So I'm assuming that's going to be the same for you. Maybe not, but I consider it a treat to get something long armed. All right, so good luck winning. Don't forget to post your progress on Instagram using the hashtag FERNWEH QAL. I've noticed that a lot of people are not using the correct hashtag. I don't know if that's, intentional, if they don't care about prizes, or if it's unintentional. So I just want to put that out there if it's unintentional. You also need to be following all 5 of our sponsors to be eligible to win. I do check that. Okay, I hope you enjoy your second set of blocks. I have so enjoyed seeing your progress on Instagram. It is so much fun seeing blocks, the same block in multitude of fabrics. Okay, have fun sewing. I will see you next week.